welcome to this is China Winetalks again. And so this is our second Wine Talks after another 4 food webinars. And this is part of the China Weeks 2021, which is curated by China National Tourist Office in London and few partners. And today in the webinar, apart from our keynote speaker, Jenny Wang, we have some special guests. Mr. Yu Peng, the Minister Counselor of Chinese National Embassy in the UK in charge of the Culture Department, and also Ms. Xue Ling, who is the Director of China National Tourist Office in London. And before we start, shall we invite Ms. Xue Ling to say a few words to our audience and also tell us a bit more about China Weeks 2021?
Thank you. Thank you, Jinjing. Dear friends, good evening. Welcome to the last live event of This is China Wine Talks given by Janet Wang for the 3rd China Tourism and Culture Weeks from May to June. I think during her last talk, I believe we all enjoy the stories about the historical and the cultural connotation of fine wine and the philosophy of mutual learning between East and West. These 6 live talks on food and mutual learning are jointly presented by CNTU London and Cambridge China Centre. We hope these stories could help bridge peoples with different cultural backgrounds in a simple and understandable way, and will help comfort people to fight the pandemic together. May to June are set for China Tourism and Culture Weeks since 2019. The theme that year was integrating culture and tourism, mutual learning between China and the UK. In 2020, due to the COVID-19, the second China Weeks was delivered virtually with the theme of stay at home, visit China online. This year's China Weeks are themed Beautiful China, benefiting the people. Okay, you can't wait to listen to Janet. So finally, I would like to thank our partner, Cambridge China Centre, Janet, and all the excellent speakers. We hope all of us could stay tuned to our social media channels and continue your journey, started with wine and food, to further explore Chinese culture. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Xue Ling. Thank you. It's our great pleasure and honor to be part of China Weeks 2021, and also particularly themed on food and wine, which is the best language across all borders, all cultures. I hope everybody enjoyed it as much as we do. Last Sunday, Jenny talked about the fascinating history of Chinese wines. So like mentioned, China has a history of making wines for around 2,000 years. And up to today, China is one of the top 10 countries in the world producing wines and also consuming wines. So talking about Chinese wine regions, Jenny will take us on a world tour of Chinese wine regions, starting from the Silk Road, Xinjiang and Yinshti, and also to along the Yellow River, Shanxi province to the east of China, east coast of China, Shandong province, and then to around Beijing, Tianjin, Hebei, the capital area. So that's a great opportunity for us to see the variety and great potentials of Chinese wine industry. I cannot wait. So the audience at the moment are muted, but we'll activate everybody's audio and video at later part of the webinar so we can carry on drinking and chatting. Okay, now let's welcome Jenny Wang and hope everybody enjoyed the wine talk tonight.
Thank you so much, Jinjing. Thank you so much, Ms. Xue Ling and Mr. Yu Peng for joining us tonight, and thank you for the wonderful introduction. So yes, as Ms. Xue Ling says, we are still staying at home, but we are going on a virtual tour around some of the most beautiful areas of China, now making beautiful wines as well. So we have a lot of grounds to cover tonight. So let's get started. So around the Chinese wine region, as Jinjing mentioned, the last week, we ascertained that China is actually a new old world wine region. And we also saw on the modern map of China, actually, the Chinese wine industry now is quite widely spread across various parts of China, right? So 中国葡萄酒产区, the wine regions of China. Usually when we talk about Chinese wine regions, we tend to talk about provinces. You know, it's a easy way for people to understand roughly the position of these regions. So we talk about provinces. But actually, if you think about the size of Chinese provinces, they're quite big, aren't they? So if you went to Shanxi province and asked the local person about their local wine production, chances are most people in Shanxi probably wouldn't even know, because the wine regions tend to be clustered quite specific, because they need certain conditions, right? Certain terroir for wine regions to prosper. So actually, talking about provinces is a starting point. It's a good starting point. But actually, I would like to invite you to consider China more in terms of landmarks, features. What makes Chinese wines special and unique for the world audience, right? Because a lot of wine regions, when they start out, they want to produce perhaps a Bordeaux style wine to start with, and China is no exception. A lot of winemakers want to first establish that they can produce an internationally recognizable wine style. But as the wine region develops and start to develop develop their own style and confidence, they want to start to show the world what's different, what's unique about the region. And I think Chinese wine regions, Chinese wine producers are already at that second phase, where they want to tell us about the story of their land, right? So I would like to invite us on this tour to think about very poetic regions around China, you know, like skylines of Gobi, or the Tianshan mountain range, the Helan mountain range, you know, the Yellow River Old Path, the Silk Road, all the way to the Panglai, what we call the Panglai Isles of the Immortals, right? Panglai Shendon, right? So these are very evocative places, and of course the Loess Plateau as well. So we'll cover a lot of ground today and look at these very unique land of China, you know, and what sort of wines they are producing there. All right, so let's start also to think a little bit about wine in the context of food as well, because food and wine go together, especially in Chinese culture, right? Chinese people still overwhelmingly would be drinking wine with a meal rather than, you know, on an empty stomach. So we can also think about these food regions. So the traditional cuisines that we are familiar with tend to be clustered around the more developed provinces, you know, around the eastern coast, for example, the center part of China. But wine regions are now telling us about the food culture of the north and west, you know, like the fragrant, spicy, sour, various other tastes around slightly more wilder parts of China as well. So that's quite exciting. It's a new addition from the wine culture that we can enjoy as well. So, and also food groups, you know, Beijing, I've signposted it here with the Peking duck, right? Coastal area, there's more seafood being enjoyed, and then a lot of lamb dishes around the north and west. And of course, overwhelmingly across China, you know, we eat a lot of pork, right? So the pig is perhaps not the happiest animal, right? So let's start from the Silk Road, so the westmost part of China, where wine made its inroad into China over 2,000 years ago. So let's revisit that story again today. And here you can see is a map of the initial route towards the west, you know, still within the region of present-day China, right? So this is the initial route out of Chang'an, so present-day Xi'an, all the way to the northwest of China. And here I've circled certain interesting locations where they were ancient winemaking regions. We can find literature referring to wine made in those regions. And today, they are still important wine-making regions. They are still notable for wines. And the circles in yellow, because we're talking about rediscovering China in the UK, the circles in yellow, you'll be pleased to know, are areas where we have wines available in the UK. So if you want to try them, let me know. We can certainly do some wine tastings in the UK of wines from these parts along the Silk Road. Right, so let's start with the westmost point where we have winemaking in China, right? So this is actually a vineyard called Silk Road, right? Silk Road Vineyards from Yili. Yili is the westmost point that we have winemaking, as you can see from this map here. And it's a very beautiful region, also famous for lavender fields and flowers and essential oils. You know, they produce very pure, beautiful essential oils, and it's a very scenic area to visit as well. And this region is also quite special, as you can see on the topography map here. You know, the mountain ranges, snow-capped mountain, there's valleys, river valleys, there's bodies of water. And what that does is it creates a lot of interesting microclimates and different terrains that impart different characters to the wine. So here you can make wines which have a range of interesting qualities depending on the position of your vineyards, because the topography is quite varied around here. Right, so here's just some beautiful pictures, because we're having a virtual tour, right? So we need some beautiful pictures to accompany our tour. Vineyards in very pristine conditions, and over here, the climate is very dry and hot in the summer. You can imagine this area is almost semi-arid, continental inland type of climate. And so what that means is that you don't get too much diseases in the vines, which is a great advantage. So here, a lot of the wineries are very naturally and easily doing organic farming, right? And that applies to the vineyards as well. So every season you can see among the vineyards, there'll be little bird nests, you know, birds' eggs and being hatched among the vines, right? So this is a very interesting and heartwarming period to be visiting these vineyards. You can see the entire process of these little birds being hatched amongst the vines. So it's really, really lovely, because they don't spray with pesticides. There's no need to really do any interference, because the dry condition means the vines are very healthy naturally. So this particular vineyard, Silk Vineyard, they have been in this area trying to make good wines for the last 20 years. But now they are planning to build visitor facilities. And this is a computer-generated image of the building that's underway right now. And it should be completed in about 2 years' time. And as you can see, a really grand project, and hoping to, in the future, welcome visitors, you know, to the region, because they can see that tourism is going to be a natural next step for the wine industries, even though it's quite far away. Because of its beautiful scenery and pristine conditions, it is a region attracting a lot of tourism. And wine tourism is indeed going to become a huge part of that in the future, I'm sure. Right, so the next place we're going along the Silk Road is Yinshti. And here is a winery I mentioned, Tianjin Vineyard. I mentioned it because the wines is available in the UK again, right? So Yinshti again is a basin, is in a basin surrounded by mountains and also facing close to a lake as well. So again, very interesting microclimates around the region. So here are some wonderful pictures to enjoy. So another name for this vineyard in English is the Skyline of Gobi, right? Very evocative name because it's surrounded on three sides by mountains and protected by the mountains. So over here again, you know, from a tourism perspective, you can go drive racing, off-road racing, perhaps, some animal photography, perhaps, and you know, we mustn't forget how big China is and how much wilderness and beautiful natural scenery and wildlife there are to explore as well as enjoying a wine holiday. And Yinshti, around here you can also visit Tianjin, which is the heavenly mountain, a snow-capped mountain around here, and the Bositenghu, which is the largest inland freshwater lake in China. Right, so with the influence of this large body of water, it has a moderating effect on the climate around the vineyards, making the condition milder for the vineyards, and the mountain protects the vineyards from harsh winds, for example, right? So it's a very ideal location to grow vines. Right, so how about food? So this region is famous for naan bread, essentially naan bread served with lamb kebab, right? Very well spiced ways of cooking lamb. And another famous dish is dapanji, big plate chicken. So the meals here are very hearty, you know, compared to some of the coastal cuisines where they're quite dainty and prettily presented. Over here, the people are generous. They eat large chunks of meat, you know, 大口吃肉,大口喝酒, we say, you know, large chunks of meat accompanied by large sips of wine, right? That's how you drink and eat around this area. So next time, if you have naan or lamb kebab, why not have it with some Chinese wines, right? So they would absolutely go perfectly well together. Right, so going slightly more inland, we reach Ningxia, present-day Ningxia, and this was also a historical wine region. And Ningxia today is possibly the most internationally acclaimed wine region of China. It's already establishing a good and firm reputation for Chinese wines in the international arena, right? Helan Shandong Lu is now, Helan Mountain East is now an official appellation for wine growing. And this area has received a lot of local government support to establish the wine industry. And they've got very ambitious plans to plant 200,000 hectares of vines. Already there are almost 100 wineries, and there are another 100 or 200 even in the pipeline to be built in the future. So again, you can see it's protected by a mountain range. The vineyards are on the east side of the Helan mountain range, and that protects the vineyards from the harsh Siberian winds. And here I've included a map. What's noticeable here is you can see there's almost a belt. You know, if you're going to visit Ningxia, you can almost do a tour of the vineyards along this Helan Mountain East appellation. There are lots of properties boutique wineries in Ningxia that you can visit, and many of them already come with excellent tourist facilities already. Boutique winery is really a key feature of Ningxia wineries, right? They like to produce artisan products. They want to make estate wines rather than mass-produced or bulk wines, right? So Ningxia is famous for boutique estate wines. So here I've put up a few brands that you can find in the UK: Silver Heights, Helan Qingxue Winery, Canaan Winery, Changyu Moser 15, Fei Cui, and Xige Estate. So these are the ones which are sort of looking outward to the international market very actively already. And I want to mention in particular Helan Qingxue Winery. So on top you can see the winery is named after this beautiful scenery of a sunny winter's day when the Helan mountain is covered in snow, right? And you may wonder, where are the vines, in this picture? And actually the vineyard is right in front of this mountain, but you can't see it in the winter. The reason is in the winter, they have to cover the vines underground with earth. They have to bury the vines in order for the vines to survive the cold, harsh winter. And this is something that's done across the vineyards in northern China, right? So it's a very labor-intensive process, but it's worth it because the region produces rather characterful wines, right? So this winery, why is it important in our story of Chinese wines? It's because Helan Qingxue Winery was the first Chinese winery to win one of the most coveted wine awards in the world, the Decanter World Wine Awards. So in 2011, Helan Qingxue Winery won one of the top award in this competition, and that really put China on the map in terms of the international awareness of the rise of Chinese wine industry, right? So before then, perhaps a few wine experts have heard of China or have tasted some Chinese wines, but it was this medal, this award that really made people take notice of China. Right. So here you can see even the Daily Telegraph had to write about it. And here I want to point out an interesting lady in the photo holding up the glass of her wine that won the prize. It was a 2009 vintage of the wine called Little Feet, 小脚丫, dedicated to her newborn young daughter, not quite newborn, but young daughter. So it was a lovely touch. So she is actually the winemaker of this award-winning winery. Right? So another lovely story, a Chinese lady winemaker winning one of the top awards in the world. And Li Demei, the gentleman next to her, is possibly the most important wine consultant and educator in China. He consults many of the wineries, top wineries in China. He's the flying winemaker of China. And while I'm at it talking about lady winemakers, I'll mention a few more. Canaan Winery, again, a wine that is found in the UK, distributed in the UK. She is, her name is Wang Fang, but she in the West is called Crazy Fang. Her name is Crazy Fang. And she was called Crazy because she was the first lady to plant Riesling in Ningxia. She was convinced and determined that Riesling would be an interesting grape to plant in China. Because as I was mentioning before that, China wanted to make red wine, mainly red wine in the Bordeaux style. So most vineyards would plant Cabernet Sauvignon, right? So until she started to experiment with Riesling, nobody had really thought very seriously about potentially making white wine or wines with sort of a famous German grape that Riesling was. Right, so she is also a bit of a pioneer. And then another lady from Silver Heights Vineyard. Again, her wines are internationally recognized for its quality and finesse. And what's interesting about her is she's the first person to experiment with biodynamic winemaking in China, but incorporating elements in Chinese agricultural practices. So biodynamic, maybe you know that it's quite trendy at the moment in winemaking, and it's all about looking at the moon phase, working with the lunar calendar rather than the solar calendar, right? But of course, to us Chinese people, we know we have had a long history of working with a moon, lunar-based calendar. Our agricultural calendar is very much linked with the lunar phase, right? So she's trying to look at the biodynamic aspects of winemaking, but not entirely just from a Western system, but also to incorporate some of our own Chinese system as well. So she's certainly someone to watch who is pushing the frontiers of winemaking in China, right? So 3 very important and female winemakers from China and in Ningxia as well. Right, so while you are in Ningxia, you must also look at the Western Xia cultural heritage that's quite unique to this region. And that is because Ningxia is home to the almost a sort of concurrent power and almost dynasty. They declared themselves a dynasty around the same time as the Song dynasty, right? So there were several parallel powers in those times, right? And Xixia is very unique in the sense that they have their own script and very strong cultural identity. And here you can see a few of the artifacts which are used to serve wine. And you can see on this particular wine jar, there's a script that's unique to the Xixia culture. Right, so while you're in Ningxia, you can also engage in some cultural activities there. And food-wise, Ningxia also contend with Xinjiang in terms of who does the best roast whole lamb. So lamb again features very heavily in the cuisine there. So if you're a guest of honor over there, they will very likely roast a whole entire lamb for you. And also another thing called hand-grabbed mutton, 手抓羊肉, right, is also very famous, and lamb skewers. So all these would go very nicely with the local wine. Possibly most likely to be a Cabernet Sauvignon blend. That's the iconic Bordeaux grape widely planted in Ningxia and in fact the whole of China. Actually, China now has the world's largest planting area of Cabernet Sauvignon. You can tell that to any French person and they will be very surprised, right? So China grows more Cabernet Sauvignon than France, than anybody else. Ningxia, potentially the Cabernet Sauvignon has now a slightly unique character. It's more herbaceous. It has a black pepper note, which is quite specific to the region. Right, so now we go to a part of China that's, again, has some very unique features, which is the Loess Plateau, the Huangtu Gaoyuan, right? So Huangtu Gaoyuan, we'll talk about Shanxi in particular today as an interesting wine region, a niche wine region, but very interesting because it sits on the world's largest Loess Plateau, right? So Loess is basically very, very fine dust particle that's being swept up by the wind, right? It's it's finer than sand, actually, right? So loess is a very, very fine grain that's being swept up by the wind and deposited. And China is home to the highest and largest loess plateau, right? So Shanxi, many people would not think of Shanxi as a wine region at all, right? But Taiyuan has a very ancient history and connection with winemaking. In fact, Marco Polo wrote about the wines of Taiyuan, and he said the grape wines of Taiyuan is of very good quality and is sold across China. It's actually being exported, if you will, to other parts of the country. And I'll mention one Chateau Rongzi, because this is, again, a wine available in the UK, right? And although it's called Chateau, which suggests a rather French name, it actually has built the winery in a very traditional Chinese style, as you can see here. So very beautiful architecture as well. And this vineyard sits on top of rather thick loess soil, 200 meters. So here's a picture of the vineyard. You can see it's the highest point is over 1,000 meters above sea level, and over very thick loess soil. So what that means is that the roots can go down very quickly. It can go very deep to extract a lot of different types of nutrients and characters from the soil system, right? So that tend to give the wine more character. And at a high level, above sea level, at a high altitude, you also can attain freshness in the wine and sometimes more character, because the ripening process is a bit more is slower because of the larger temperature differential between day and night, for example. So the grapes have a more interesting development cycle. It can ripen during the day, and at night when the temperature drops, it means that it can retain some acidity. So the wines tend to be quite fresh and well balanced, right? And I thought what's interesting about Shanxi is also it's famous for a dish called 油面卷. 油面卷 is almost like these rolled up noodle, but with an almost bolognese type of sauce on top, right? It's a tomato-based sauce. It could be meaty or it could be vegetarian. But it's almost like a bolognese dish. And this would go very well with a Pinot Noir, for example, from Shanxi. So next time if you're having spaghetti bolognese, why not try a Chinese Pinot Noir from Shanxi? It would work very, very well as well. And it will make your friends talk about the wine and your food, I'm sure, as well. And around here, you can visit some UNESCO World Heritages, such as the Yungang Shiku, which is a 5th to the 6th century Buddhist cave complex. There are over 51,000 Buddha statues, carved statues into the rock, right? So it's really impressive and rather unique in the world. Or you can visit the ancient city of Pingyao, which is a 14th century ancient town, perfectly preserved. And it was also an important banking town as well. It had a rather sophisticated financial services within the town, so it was quite prosperous, right? So these two are UNESCO World Heritages that you can visit. Okay, so you might say, well, that's all very lovely, but I only get chances to go to China for business. So if you're a business person who goes to China and don't have the luxury of perhaps visiting Ningxia or Shanxi or even further west into Xinjiang, etc., and you are more familiar with the economic clusters of China, for example, along the eastern coast, I'm pleased to tell you that there is also a very prosperous wine scene around one of these economic clusters, namely the Jinjing economic zone, right? So if you happen to be around Beijing, Tianjin, and Hebei region, you can absolutely also go and visit some vineyards. So quick introduction to the Jinjing economic hub, very important, as well as a political center. It's also a very large economic area in China and accounts for 9% of Chinese total GDP. So let's talk about Jing first. Jing means capital. So Beijing is the northern capital, right? And even I was quite surprised to learn that actually there is an interesting wine region so close to Beijing, right? And it's called Fangshan. Fangshan, as you can see on this map, is very close to Beijing. It's literally in the outskirts, a suburban area of Beijing. And Fangshan, why is it unique? It's very small, but I think it's interesting, nevertheless, as a wine region, because it's trying to push itself in the areas of sustainability, right? So it wants to do viticulture in a sustainable and high-tech way, right? So here you can see the middle picture in the bottom. They're putting in these weather data detector in the vineyards, so they can read data and feed the data to the weather station, and the weather station can also feed back the data, right? So it's done in a very high-tech way, and they are also very keen to push through precision and sustainable viticulture. And of course, being so close to Beijing, the other huge area is corporate entertainment and tourism. So in the height of sort of lockdown over here in the UK last autumn, actually Fangshan was able to hold their first wine cultural festival, and they welcomed 30,000 visitors during that time, right? And you can see on the picture, the bottom left picture, it's very much a family occasion. And in China, wine tourism actually is not just for adults, it's very much for children. It's very much a fun day out for the whole family. So children, they might not be drinking the wines, but they can participate in other really fun activities like stamping on the grapes, for example, right? So China is already starting to think about tourism and how to make it inclusive for the entire family, right? So I think that's a really, really good way to develop the industry, to inform and educate people about wine as well through these sort of cultural and tourist activities that are available in many of the wineries. And the other very interesting thing about the Fangshan area is that it's very close to the Peking Man site at Zhoukou, right? So again, if you're planning an itinerary, if you're for business or for pleasure around Beijing, you should absolutely check out this Zhoukou site, which is where the Homo erectus pekinensis was found. It's a prehistorical fossils from 700,000 years ago, right? So so go check that out and then go visit a winery in Fangshan nearby. So I'll mention one winery which is available in the UK, Bolongbao. Bolongbao is interesting because it's the first Chinese vineyard to be to get the EU, US, and China organic certifications. So they do organic practices. So as you may know, in the EU, for example, in order to qualify for organic status, not only do you have to do organic viticulture for a while in order to qualify, but you then have to continue for at least 3 years before you can get certified. And then you have to keep on doing that. If you 1 year, if you decide not to practice organically, then you will lose your certification, right? So this requires a lot of determination and hard work in the vineyard in order to A, qualify, and B, to maintain your organic status. And Bolomba is the first to receive, not only domestically, but also international certifications as well. Right, so next time if you're having Peking duck or other delicacies like hot pot, 羊肉 in particular, 涮羊肉 or 京酱肉丝, so all these delicacies around this area, you know what wine you should be drinking next time. Okay, so let's talk about the Jing in the Jinji, the second one, right? So that refers to Tianjin, which is a major port very close to Beijing, right? So this is a direct and administered municipality of China, very important city. And this is closely linked to the story we mentioned last time as well about 改革开放, reform and opening up, right? So Tianjin was where Wang Chao was founded, Dynasty Winery, as one of the first earliest Sino-foreign joint ventures, right, as part of this reform and opening up initiative, right? So this was a Sino-French joint venture between Remy Martin and the Tianjin City Grape Garden, right, founded in 1980. And some delicacies that you might know, internationally famous, is 小笼包, of course, and 煎饼果子, which is almost like a crepe. It's basically a crepe, but with a fritter as well, and it's savory. So these are some of the things that you can have with wines from Tianjin. And Ji, right? Jinjing Ji. Ji refers to Hebei. Hebei is a province close to Beijing. So this cluster, Jinjing Ji cluster, is because they are very close together, right? So Hebei, the main wine regions in Hebei is Shachen and Huailai. Martin Winery, I'll mention here. Again, available in the UK, but also has an interesting UK connection. So the idea, the whole project came about because of a state visit by a British Prime Minister at the time, Sir Ted Heath, right? Ted Heath was a British Prime Minister, and he went to China. He went to Hebei in 1996, and he said, "Oh, actually, I think maybe a wine industry might work around here," and obviously, some people took to heart that comment, and in 1997, Martin Winery was founded. And Martin Winery is interesting for producing, for really excelling, not just producing, but excelling at making a white wine out of a grape called dragon eye, 龙眼. So 龙眼 here, I don't mean the fruit 龙眼, right? It's actually a type of grape grown in China for 800 years. And although we think it's a European variety that came to China from Europe, but actually nobody has found its equivalent outside of outside of China. Is not quite true, because this grape then traveled to Japan. So it's found in Japan, but it came from China, right? Whereas nobody can find it in Europe at the moment, at least, right? So it's possible that in the future, maybe some DNA testing or some other test would identify its European ancestors. But so far, we would like to claim it as a Chinese grape because it's been in China for 800 years. Right, so What's interesting with Martin Winery is that the winery owner, he would say, "Come and visit me. I will serve my wine with the fried freshwater prawns from the reservoir down the road," right? So you can see here, the winery is very close to this large body of water. Again, when you have a body of water, it has a moderating effect on the microclimate, the site climate. So again, it has a moderating effect on the vineyard nearby, right? So you can have local prawns with the local wine, and that's always the best wine and food matching, is eat local and drink local, right? If you don't know how to pair your wine, just order something local and chances are it will work very well. So of course, if you are in Hebei, there are lots of other really tasty dishes too. I think for me in particular, I think they do a lot of amazing breads, flat breads with fillings. That seems to be what I love the most from that region. And if you are visiting that region, because it's close to Beijing, it's also close to one of the most popular stretches of the Great Wall, Badaling, right? So if you're visiting Beijing, you are visiting the Great Wall, don't forget to then extend your trip to visit a vineyard around Huailai. Here on Google Map, you can see you can drive there in 43 minutes. So a day trip is perfectly doable. Right, so if we talk about Great Wall, we have to mention the Great Wall Winery as well, right? So last time we mentioned Great Wall Winery is another one of the product of the reform opening up, right? And Great Wall made the first Chinese white wine, actually from the Dragon Eye grape as well. So it's a very important winery, and it was the first winery was built in 1979 in Hebei province. Here it's called Chateau Sengod, Senggan in Chinese. And another thing that Hebei could claim, sort of another fame, I suppose, claim to fame for Hebei, is Marceline. So Marceline is a French grape variety that was a crossbreed between Cabernet Sauvignon and Grenache. It was initially produced in the south of France for the Languedoc region, but it never really took off in France. And it was then introduced, I think in 2000, to Hebei by Li Demei, Professor Li Demei, whom I introduced earlier, the flying winemaker of China. So he planted Marceline in Hebei first. And now Marceline is really showing up incredible characters in various parts of China, to the extent that now Chinese wine producers are starting to ask the question, is Marceline actually our star variety, right? So, a lot of places now beside Hebei, in Ningxia, Xinjiang, everywhere, they are starting to plant Marceline. And Marceline in each region would show slightly different characters, but very expressive, very interesting grape to watch from China. Right? So, this list could go on forever in terms of what to see around that region, around Beijing and Hebei, right? So here are just a handful, all UNESCO World Heritages. I think there are plenty, being, the capital of 3 dynasties continuously in Chinese history. Right, so now we are going all the way to the far east side, right, of China, to Shandong, and in particular to the region around Panglai, which is becoming a really promising sub-region of Shandong in terms of winemaking, right? So Panglai is here on the map, sort of next to the Bohai Sea. So it has a bit of maritime influence from the sea. So here, last time I mentioned that Zhangyu Winery was the first to be founded in Shandong as a pioneering wine company built in 1892 as part of this modernizing initiative in the late Qing dynasty, right? So Zhangyu was the first industrialized wine company of China. And it's still going strong, right? It's still one of the top wine brands in China and actually internationally as well. And Zhangyu is credited with importing Cabernet Garnished to China. So Cabernet Garnished is the unique name we use in China, 蛇龙珠, right? 蛇龙珠is actually unique to China, but DNA shows that it's most likely to be Cabernet, right? So Cabernet was introduced by Zhangyu Company back in 1896. So the founder of Zhangyu, Zhang Bishi, he imported over 100 European wine grape varieties. He brought over 100 grapes to test around Shandong and see which ones would do well in the local climate and the local soil. And Cabernet Garnished was the one that he decided was one of the star performers, right? So now we call it 蛇龙珠 in Chinese. Just a few more wineries worthy of mentioning. One is Domaine de Longdai. Domaine de Longdai is the Chinese project of the famous domain, the Rothschild, right? Baron Rothschild. And of course, Baron Rothschild is most famous for making Chateau Lafite, right? So Chateau Lafite. So this is the Lafite of China, right? This is what we call the Lafite of China, is based in Panglai as well, in Shandong province. And another vineyard, interestingly, with a UK connection, is the neighbor of Chateau Lafite in China, Domaine de Longdai's neighbor, called Treaty Port Vineyards. In fact, Treaty Port was there before Domaine de Longdai, and it's founded by an English man called Chris Ruffle. So he's an English businessman who decided to build a Scottish castle in the middle of a rural China, right? So you can see the winery below, in the picture below, is a Scottish style castle because he had a history, a project before revamping a Scottish castle. That's why he thought it would be a great idea to bring along the Scottish architect to start a new project in China. And also, interestingly, they have a Taoist temple inside the vineyard as well, which is the picture above. So besides a Scottish castle, there's also a Taoist temple for which he's named this wine on the right called the Philosopher, right? So this wine is named, dedicated to the Taoist monk who occupies the temple. So rather eclectic and interesting collections of wineries. And Lu Cai is quite famous for braising, braised seafood and braised pork belly, chicken, and even vegetable dishes like tofu. So the texture is silky. The color is deep and dark, and there's a lot of soya sauce, umami, xian xian, we call xian xian, umami profile, right? So xian xian, that goes very well with certain wines. For example, the Cabernet Garnished, because a lot of these Chinese wines are produced with food in mind, right? So they tend to have good fruity profiles, soft tannins, and sometimes you would detect also a saline quality that goes rather well with the seafood. So marketing people would tell you the saline quality comes from the influence of the sea, the maritime influence would impart this saline quality that goes well with umami type of dishes, right? But that's usually a marketing narrative rather than a scientific one. But I like it quite a lot too. Right, so UNESCO World Heritage Sites of Shandong, very famous, Mount Tai, the most sacred mountain of China, where historically emperors, if they think they are worthy, can go and visit Mount Tai and offer a tribute, but only if they think they are a good and worthy emperor, right? So even the emperors have to check whether they qualify to visit this sacred mountain or not, right? So Mount Tai, very beautiful, very scenic region. And then, of course, the Confucius Temple complex in Qufu, right? So not only is it the sort of the mausoleum site of of Confucius and his descendants, but also it's a very important archive, library of Confucian and philosophical texts that still are preserved within the complex. Right, so I want to slightly cover a little bit about what we can do in the UK, right? So that was a virtual tour, again, a whirlwind tour of vast terrains of China. So now back to the UK. In fact, we can already enjoy a range of wines in the UK. So these are from some entry level to some of the very expensive top-end wines that's produced in China, right? From £12 to over £200 and everything in between. So I highly recommend that you do seek out opportunities in the UK to try them. And in fact, when I do events, I am in the lucky position to be able to showcase a variety of wine styles, right? So ranging from sparkling wine to rosé, to white wine, of course, red wine, Bordeaux blend type of wines, all the way to sweet wines, ice wine, right? That's very special. So from sparkling to sweet, we have quite a large range already accessible in the UK. And the issue is that not so many people in the UK, or indeed in China even, right, let alone outside of China, know there's a thriving and fledgling wine industries that's bursting onto the scene in China. So I feel the key things that we could do is actually through events, right, to talk about stories, talk about culture and history. And at the same time, when you're talking about history and food and culture, you can introduce a bit of wine tasting for people. And generally, that's how people can discover to their surprise, pleasant surprise, that China does now indeed make very fine wines, right? Because if you just stick them on supermarket shelves, I think Chinese wines are probably not very competitive at the moment if it's passively sitting on a supermarket shelf waiting for someone to pick it up, right? So we need to actively, through events, through storytelling, to promote Chinese wines and let more people know about it and try the wines as well. So just to show you some pictures of the events before COVID that I've done, for example, working with Chinese restaurants and corporate entertainment. And you can see that we can talk about not just the wines, we can talk about culture, we can talk about how to do business, etiquette around the banquet table. We can talk about women in wine, we can talk about poetry and philosophy, right? So wine is really a gateway to a range of interesting topics that people can discuss. And when people are relaxed with a glass of wine in hand, actually that's the best moment for cultural interaction and understanding and enjoyment and forging of relationships and friendships. So this works very well. And then the second step, hopefully, is that Chinese restaurants will start to also get on board and start to improve their wine list. Because quite frankly, Chinese restaurants are not famous for having the most imaginative or even decent wine list at the moment, right? Because a lot of the waiting staff, they might not have the knowledge, and therefore the bosses, they are not willing to experiment, and the serving staff are not knowledgeable to recommend wines. So hopefully with some time and also some education, hopefully the Chinese restaurants will start to showcase some Chinese wines, because really Chinese food is already so popular across the world. Chinese restaurants will be the natural carrier, right, for wines. And in fact, if we think about what restaurants is in Chinese, 酒家, wine house, right? Traditionally, wine was served in restaurants to enhance the meal, to enhance the dishes, and make the experience more enjoyable, right? So hopefully we can bring that tradition back. Right. So just very quickly, why do we think that the world needs to know about Chinese wine, right? So apart from the fact that, as we have discovered, with a glass of wine, we can talk about many aspects of Chinese culture, right? Not just about the wine, not just about the wineries, but about poetry, history, culture, customs, etc. And also it's a social lubricant, right? So when you have a corporate event after a whole day of discussing business, it's really nice to have a dinner or a wine reception. But why should those wine receptions not be serving Chinese wines, especially if you've been talking about China all day, right? So hopefully in the future, we'll also see more Chinese wines being served at various events, not necessarily just dinners, but even forums, right? University discussions about intellectual topics, even, would work quite well at the end with a wine reception. I've done that a few times at Cambridge and Oxford, and they go down really well, and they keep the people staying behind till the end of the day because they want to drink the wine, right? So it's a great social lubricant as well, right? So wine, the Chinese wine industry is also giving us a glimpse into some of the dynamics of what's going on in China at the moment. For example, with poverty alleviation, in provinces like Ningxia, for example. Ningxia was a very poor province, but the wine industry is having a lot of benefits for the local economy, not just in terms of the agriculture side, but also infrastructure, right? Because if you want to build tourism, you have to have infrastructure that goes with it, right? So poverty alleviation, for example, also green initiatives, right? How do you stop Ningxia being suffering more land loss to the Gobi Desert? Actually, by planting vines, you can secure the soil, right? So there's green angles to talk about. And climate change, of course, with global climate change, people are looking at interesting terroirs in China where you can go up in altitude where it's cooler, or go up north, for example. So China is providing very interesting dynamics in the global wine industry because of the change in climate and what that means for traditional wine regions around the world, right? So China is potentially an exciting new frontier for the international wine scene. Right. And wine, as I was mentioning, we mentioned organic practices, biodynamic practices. So actually wine industry is leading the charge in China in terms of this idea of provenance and sustainable farming methods and ensuring food safety. Because with wine, we do care about where it comes from, even which year it was produced, right? So the provenance is very important. And wine industry is certainly a leader in this area as well. And I think, in terms of what we consider as made in China in the new era, we need to re-establish the image of what is made in China. And wine could be this almost a name card product, right? That combines technology, innovation, but also artisanship, right? It's still a lot of it is produced by hand, right? It's still an agricultural product. So it's a wonderful product that embodies a lot of what we want to make in the future as well, right? So I think Chinese wine is very exciting, and I hope you will follow this the development and growth and prosperity of the Chinese wine industry. So thank you very much. So if you want to learn more about all these background, history and industry, where it came from and where it's going, this is my book, The Chinese Wine Renaissance. And I do welcome that you do get in touch with me with any comments and questions. And indeed, if you want to try Chinese wines and do Chinese wine events, I will be most glad to hear from you. And hopefully I can also introduce some wines for you to try in the future. Thank you. So I'll hand it back to Jing Zhao, and we can do some interactions and chats and questions. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Jenny. Thank you. It's such an interesting 1 hour talk, really taking us through thousands of miles of Chinese wine regions, starting from the west of China to the east coast. But not only about wines and wineries and people behind them, but also lots of great tips for what to do, what to see, and what to eat. I'm sure that will give many of us some interesting ideas for next time visiting China. And we are trying to activate the audio and the video buttons. So everybody, please just feel free to join in for if you have any comments, any questions.
Great, thank you, Jing Zhao. I see Jennifer. Hello, Jennifer.
Yes, fascinating talk. And in fact, I had a question that was partly addressed by the talk, which is about the training and skills for anyone wishing to work in the vineyards. So in my neighborhood, in fact, there's a Wine and Spirits Education Trust. And there's around 70 centers for training and learning all the way through four stages of wine education and winemaking. So my question was, what route for training is expected by the vineyard owners for people wanting to become vineyard managers?
Right. So actually in China, there are several colleges and even universities having dedicated departments to viticulture courses. So if you want to become a professional winemaker, etc., you can already get related degrees in China. And of course, a lot of the current, I suppose, the current winemakers in China, people like Professor Li Demei and the people I mentioned, like Emma Gao from Silver Heights, Wang Fang from Cannon Winery, they all spent some time abroad as well. So Emma was in Bordeaux. Professor Li Demei also did several wine regions, and Wang Fang was in Germany. That's why she loves Riesling so much. So they tend to have had some training and experience abroad, and then they are coming back. But the younger generation of Chinese winemakers, many of them are sort of domestically trained, and they are extremely passionate, are extremely good. And some of them do go abroad, learn skills, and come back. And also, Chinese wine industry is very international. There are also a lot of winemakers from all over the world now making wine in China, because for them it's also a challenge. They want to try their skills in a different type of climate and soil that China provides. So China is exciting even for very experienced international winemakers as well. So it's a two-way process. It's a really exciting sort of mixing pot of experiences and cultures that's happening in China. So it's really, really good. In terms of service, the service side of things, that is still predominantly based around European curriculum. For example, WSET is really, really popular in China. In fact, China is now WSET's biggest international market. It's the most important international market for WSET, which stands for the Wine and Spirit Education Trust, by the way, which is a UK curriculum for wine professionals. So that is now extremely popular in China. And then the sommelier is a different route, right? So sommelier, they're trained. Sommelier is now becoming a perfectly respectable career choice for Chinese people, right? Because, it's highly well regarded these days, right? So the master of sommeliers, or the sommelier training, is also getting popularity in China as well. Yeah, so there are different routes. I suppose what's difficult, challenging, I suppose, is Chinese restaurants. For example, in the UK, right? That's what we kind of know a little bit. The staff at this stage don't tend to have much wine knowledge. But you're already seeing some of the top Chinese restaurants in London, for example, places like Hakkasan, Park Chinoise, Hutong, or, a few of these places, where they are starting to have Chinese wine on their list, right? Because they have professional sommeliers, they have professional, they work very closely between the kitchen and the sommelier, right? The chef and the sommeliers work closely to design the menu. And slowly, hopefully, we can see some Chinese wines being incorporated. And then from the top restaurants, hopefully that would slowly filter down into the more mid-range or casual restaurants. Hopefully, the trend is led from the top, I suppose. But yeah, it's a process. But I'm really hopeful that the restaurants will get on board, because that's our best vehicle to get more people to try Chinese wines, because Chinese food is already popular. And I hope to see that, because if you go to a Japanese restaurant, you already would order, sake, or, Korean restaurant, you would have soju or something. And Chinese restaurant, you can get Qingdao beer, which is a good sign, right? It means the clients want to have something local. But if we have good Chinese wines in good Chinese restaurants, I'm sure people will try. Yeah. Mm.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah. Hello, Bob.
Hello, Janet. I was just thinking perhaps be a bold person to try to get to Chinese wine into Chinese takeaways.
Yeah, wow. Why not?
Persuaded. Some of them are not vastly expensive, so I think you might be persuaded just to give it a go.
Yeah, I hope so. I think at the moment, not so many people know about Chinese wines or know that China even makes wine. And secondly, I think a lot of the association with Chinese wine is like baijiu or liquor, because a lot of my Western friends who have tried Chinese alcohol, it tends to be baijiu, and they can't quite get used to that. So when you talk about, do you want to try Chinese wine, like the initial reaction is not necessarily positive. So that's why I think if you put it on a supermarket shelf, which Changyu and several other companies have tried, it didn't exactly work very well, because if you are just a passive product in the UK. UK is one of the most competitive markets for wine. We get wines from all over the world at very good prices. So Chinese wine is not meant to be super cheap, right? We're not going to sell bulk Chinese wine in the international market because it's not economical. It makes no sense. So we want to sell premium wine internationally. And premium wine, you're not going to win on price alone. You have to have character, you have to have a story, you have to get people excited and interested and curious. And that's why I think first we need to start with events, tell people about it, talk about stories, history, culture, blah, 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 get them to try first. And then they might go to a supermarket and look for it, right? But it won't work the other way around. Yeah. So yeah.
Hi, Janet.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I don't show face now because I'm not properly dressed. I just think apart from Chinese restaurants, how about Chinese supermarkets?
Yeah, that's a very good point. So supermarkets, interestingly, I know several people have tried, and I actually helped Great Wall to put some Chinese wine into an Irish Chinese supermarket. Mm-hmm. But we haven't had a great deal of luck in the UK yet. But I'm sure this is something that they will try.
Yeah, I think you need to work on it. If you put some on the shelf, first through the Chinese people buy them, and let the Western friends to try. Yeah, the wines I bought from you, I did give quite a number of my Western friends. And most of them loved it, really.
Yeah, they're great. I really think they're really good wines.
Yes, that's right.
They're not just curiosity. They're genuinely good wines that you would drink again and again, because we have to go beyond just being curiosity, right? We have to, first, maybe it comes from curiosity, but then later, you need to be a good wine in your own right that people want to drink again and again and again, right? So that's also part of the challenge. And I think that the challenge with Chinese supermarkets is that two things. One is, of course, margin, right? So supermarkets work on pretty cutthroat margins, for one. And secondly, they have quite ingrained distribution networks and relationships. So it's difficult to break into that sort of the incumbent distribution setup. And thirdly, I think it's because you can sort of find very generic, sometimes you find very generic Great Wall or Changyu or Dynasty wines, right, in the sort of dusty shelves behind some counter in Chinese supermarket. But those are sort of some kind of legacy products from the early 80s. They are the bulk wines, right? So they came almost with the Shaoxing wine into the Chinese supermarkets. So they are not representative of what Great Wall wines taste like today. Great Wall actually make very good premium wines as well, but they also make very entry-level generic bulk wine. But it's the bulk wine that's right now sitting on Chinese supermarket shelves, right? Along with Shaoxing wine, which we use mainly for cooking. So it hasn't broken out of that image yet.
Yeah, that is your job.
Let's see. But yeah, I mean, I guess my role perhaps is mainly in the sort of talking bit rather than selling. So I do have friends who are distributors, and I try to help them. But I'm not a wine merchant. I don't sell wine myself, but I try to sometimes help a bit. But of course, I know it's difficult. It's difficult. It needs some time to break through. But I think I'm hoping that if I talk about it more, hopefully, eventually, it would start to generate some kind of
and then you can add to the wine shops, a shelf of especially those got rewarded, those wines, really.
Yeah, they're very good. I'm sure, like, you guys will go and tell all your friends, so it will spread, and hopefully they will.
Well, words don't count.
Of course it does. It's all
need a big marketing.
Yeah. But so marketing, of course, is important. So, for example, baijiu companies, right? They have a lot of money to throw in marketing, but baijiu is breaking the international market quite slowly with very limited result.
Yeah, baijiu probably is not.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, it needs to be a combination, I think, marketing, but also wine is more easily accepted by the Western audience because
the people like to try different,
Yeah.
Great, thank you, Liu Li. Did I see somebody raise hands seconds ago?
Yeah.
It's me. Well, Janice is a brilliant talk, and I must say that I'm illiterate about this one. Maybe my question is a silly question, if you don't mind.
No.
We heard about this, so the red one with red meat and white with white. Is this narrative culturally based or is scientifically based?
So it's definitely not scientific based. And I suppose red, it's a simple rule of thumb, I suppose, that is not just for Chinese food, but also even with French food or whatever. You often hear that people say red wine for meat and white wine for fish, right? That is sort of the rule of thumb ways to pair up wines. But in reality, it's not always necessarily the best match, right? So sometimes a white wine can go nicely with meat, and similarly a light red wine sometimes can go with light fish dishes, or sorry, not light fish, like grilled fish, oily fish. So I tend to think it's more important to match the cooking method and the sauce and the weight of the food to the wine. So if the sauce is heavy, you want a sort of slightly weightier, medium-bodied, perhaps red wine to go with a weighty dish, right? But if the sauce is very light, like the 手抓羊肉, where there's hardly any sauce, it's just very fresh lamb meat, simply cooked, boiled. You can have that with white wine, actually. It will be very nice with white wine because it's quite light, there's no sauce, and it's refreshing to have. So it all depends a little bit about the cooking method and the weight of the food. Yeah.
So it's not that scientifically strict, which means the bean curd is white. If I cook the bean curd in red, then I can use the red one to go with it, right?
Yeah. So if it's if it's a stewed, like the braised tofu with a lot of sauce on it, then it would go with red wine, a light red wine, without too much tanning. Like the Pinot Noir I showed, the red wine from Shanxi, that would go rather nice with a tofu dish that's got some sauce to it. But if you are doing like congban tofu, then maybe a white wine. So.
Thank you very much.
You're most welcome. No, it's a great question. It's not at all a simple one. It's one of the most complex questions in wine is how to match it with food.
Can I just add? I mean, it is a very good question, but the characteristics of the wine are important. You'll often find people have a white wine sometimes with fish because of the acidity in the wine. You want something fairly crisp. I mean, you can think of putting vinegar on fish and chips, for example, or something where you want the acidity to cut through the food. Now, if you go to a red wine, if you look at a Pinot Noir, I mean, if we think of French wines, you've probably got wines from Bordeaux, mainly Cabernet Sauvignon grape, and Pinot Noir wines from Burgundy. And the Pinot Noir tend to be a lighter style. But the difference between the two is that the real structure of Pinot Noir is based on acidity. That's the real the main preserve. They both have tannin and acidity. But in Pinot Noir, it's more the acidity that comes through. So those lighter red wines can be very, very good with fish. So it can be a good choice if you've got a table of people and you just want one bottle of wine. But some have fish and some have meat. If you go for a light Pinot Noir, that will probably do the fish eaters as well, particularly if the fish has a bit of sauce on. Whereas the Bordeaux wine, which tends to be more structured on tannin, doesn't go very well with fish. But it's that difference. It's the acidic feature of the wine that is similar to what you tend to get in white wines. That mean that some of those red wines will do just as well.
Absolutely.
I think the rules. I've got a little wine list at home from the 1930s, and if you look at from a wine merchant, if you look at the front of that, it's very, very few wines. Just gives the traditional sort of wines that you serve. So the first course, you might start with a sherry, and the first course might be a Chablis or Loire wine, white wine, and then it will probably just be Claret or Burgundy with the main course. And I think these days the answer is, well, have what you like. Your question about what will go well with it is part of the fun of experimentation, actually.
Absolutely.
But you might well find that a heavy Bordeaux, a Claret won't go well with fish because the tannin doesn't work very well.
Exactly.
I wouldn't get a nice wine for Burgundy, or of course a Pinot Noir from China. Some of those lovely Pinot Noirs, the one that Chris Raffles made, the Philosopher. That was lovely. We had a taste of that. And that was a super example of Pinot Noir, nice and fruity as well. And that would go well with a fish dish where you need acidity in the wine. The main thing is experiment. That's the excuse to keep trying the wine, you see.
That's right. Experiment is the fun. And with Chinese food, of course, it's more complicated because we have so many dishes at the same time, right? So it almost doesn't make sense to talk about, what's the exact wine to go with each dish. So you sometimes have to generalize a little bit more. What I find useful normally as a rule is to look at the cuisine style. So usually we will be like, let's have Sichuan food tonight, or let's have Cantonese food. So there's an overarching theme to the dishes, although they can be fish or vegetable or whatever. But if it's predominantly going to be spicy, then you don't want a tannic big red wine. What you want is freshness, acidity, and even possibly sweetness, because those things will counterbalance spicy food, right? So you might want even a slightly sweet Riesling because it's got a bit of sweetness, it's got great acidity, and it can cut through grease, it can temper down the hot, spicy tones. So that would work probably with a whole entire table of food when it's predominantly hot, right? And then Cantonese food, perhaps there's sweet, sour, there's soya sauce, there's like sauce which are quite velvety. Then perhaps you then go with maybe a Pinot Noir would do, for the whole table again, because it's got acidity, it's got fruitiness, but it has very light tannin, soft tannins. So again, that might just do for the whole table. So I think with Chinese food in particular, it doesn't make a great deal of sense to talk about food and dish matched with wine. You have to think a bit broadly about what might go in a generic sense. It's difficult.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jenny, for the wonderful talk. Now I have a very good appetite going down into
I know, yes. A nice
And thank you to our audience for the very good questions and great
Thank you all.
And for joining us on today, Father's Day, a very special day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks everybody for joining China Weeks 2021, which is a 2-month festival lasting from early May to really end of June. So there are lots of wonderful online contents of China Weeks 2021 as well. At the end of the session, I'll share a screen so you see some QR code. So one QR code is a landing page for China Weeks 2021. So if you want to understand more events, more online contents, that's the QR code to go to. And another QR code is our WeChat groups for Northern Mandarin wine clubs. So if you want to stay in contact with us, understanding more about future events and more about Chinese wines, that's the second QR code. Thank you so much. So it's really the best thing to do in the world to have food and wine as a passion and also as a career. So that's wonderful. And also we will do lots of other events and carry on the dialogues to talk about cross-culture China, Western food, wine, art, and tourism, culture, all those wonderful things. Thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to see everybody in person, hopefully October time when restrictions are fully lifted. But in the meanwhile, happy Father's Day tonight to many of us, and happy every day. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you so much for joining us. Take care.
Thank you.